Caitlin, thanks so much for your time today. So I wonder, can I ask you first to introduce yourself and what you do and where you work and what your background is in relation to sleep?
Yeah, absolutely. And so nice to be here and talking about sleep, which is absolutely my favorite subject and so important, particularly for doctors. So my background is I'm a GP. I started in hospital medicine and then actually moved to general practice after really struggling with night shifts and wanting a little bit more consistency. So I understand how tough it is to be working regular night shifts. I was a medical reg before that. And so then went into general practice and did sort of general GPing for a while. And actually, about sort of 10 years ago, I started developing sleep problems myself. Was in a particularly stressful time and struggling. And I was finding I was awake for hours during the night, driving my husband mad by tossing and turning, opening and closing windows, stealing the duvet, whatever it was. And I kind of looked back on my own medical training to see what I knew about sleep and figure out whether I could fix myself, as we often do as doctors, and realized that actually I hadn't had any training on the basic sort of biology and the triggers to sleep. I'd been taught about obstructive sleep apnea, about sleeping tablets, but really nothing about insomnia and what those natural switches are for sleep. And actually, after I'd done some research, actually, across the whole of Europe, on average, doctors get 20 to 30 minutes of training on sleep. So all of us don't really understand it. And so I then started looking into kind of Eastern medicine, but also Western medicine about what these kind of triggers for sleep are, why we aren't sleeping, how we can optimize our body and mind for sleep. I became a cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia practitioner, studied circadian rhythms and how to treat circadian rhythms. And I also got very interested in women's health, menopause, and how hormones impact sleep quality and how good we feel the next day. And so this has really become my passion as far as general practice goes, and become a GP with a specialist interest in sleep. And it's my kind of bread and butter. And actually, about 3 years ago, just after COVID, myself and another GP colleague and a pediatric sleep specialist formed the Sleep Project because we were seeing such huge rates of insomnia post-COVID. And we think that was partly to do with people working from home, working in their bedrooms, not doing as much exercise as they might do, but also the increased level of stress that we all saw through COVID. And mental health conditions skyrocketed, but sleep disorders did the same thing. And we thought this is the moment where we really have to start getting sleep help out there, sleep education out there, because most people, if they go see their GP about sleep, often they don't have the training in sleep. Partly they don't have access to sleep therapy. It's not always covered on the NHS. And there's so many people out there suffering with sleep problems. I felt it was so important that that was really where I wanted my energy to be.
Yeah, amazing. So what's the relationship between stress and sleep?
So the two of them are really closely interlinked, and almost it's a two-way street, where if you're feeling stressed, anxious, depressed, you're much more likely to develop sleep problems. There's a really close relationship between those two. And we know that if you're having sleep problems, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to have a major episode of depression or develop anxiety problems. So actually both of those go hand in hand. And that's because our sleep is so important in our emotional regulation. And that when that's not working properly, particularly our dream sleep, which is very important in taking the memories and our experiences, learning from them, and storing them away in a way that we can access them and learn from them, but also remove some of that sort of painful content that's there with the emotional reactions, so you can learn from an experience without every time you think about it still having that emotional burden that might come with it. And when that doesn't work properly, you develop things like post-traumatic stress disorder, where you get recurring dreams and intrusive thoughts about something that has occurred because you haven't managed to process it properly through your dream sleep, essentially.
Wow. So why, and this is a bit of a kind of going back a step, I guess. Why is sleep important? Why, particularly for doctors and surgeons, might sleep be important to prioritize?
So I almost think a better question is what function in your body is not linked to sleep? And actually, there's none of them. Literally everything in your body requires sleep. Lots of people kind of talk about why we sleep because from a developmental perspective, being asleep is a dangerous time for animals and humans, where we're more vulnerable. We can get eaten by prey. We're not hunter-gathering. We're not eating. We're not doing anything that's really core important, which actually shows the value of sleep. If it wasn't absolutely essential, why would we spend 8 hours every day doing this? And I think that speaks to everything that it does. It resets our body and mind so it can function the next day. So it's essential for our immune systems. It's important for clearing waste proteins from our brains and making sure that we're able to store our memories properly and have space in the memory bank for the next day. It's important for our repair of our muscles and everything within our body. It's important for our emotional resilience, our empathy, our kindness, our ability to relate to others. It's also really important for our cardiovascular system. So we know that if you're not sleeping well, your blood pressure goes up, you're more risk of cardiovascular disease, heart attacks are more common, our insulin resistance, all of those things are regulated during our sleep. We know diabetes becomes more common when you're not sleeping well. So it's absolutely vital to every function in our body to be able to restore our body and mind and almost just kind of hit reset so that the next day we're able to do what we need to do. And if you neglect your sleep, those things aren't happening and you're basically using up your stores and not quite hitting back to zero again before you start your next day.
So if I was someone that maybe, was happy to kind of fudge it a bit, I hadn't quite had enough sleep, I thought I could probably cope. Is there an incremental difference? And this is a leading question and a particular area of interest of mine, but in terms of performance, say, as a surgeon or in whichever field, you've talked about the very, very important, integral, functional importance of sleep over time and over a lifetime. But in the moment of doing something as well as you possibly can, is it important that you've slept well the night before?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been studies measuring this, restricting people's sleep to different amounts. So, for example, 8 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours, or no sleep at all. And they have found that if you go 10 days with 6 hours of sleep, your performance is impaired the same as someone who has gone one night without sleep at all, which is pretty significant. And that if you go more than 16 hours without sleep, which is just a kind of late night, you can see drops in your performance, which are not dissimilar to being over the legal limit to drive in many countries. So our ability to perform, they did a simple test where they asked someone to hit a little button every time they saw the light happen. What happens is when you're deprived of sleep, you often miss that little light going on about sort of 10% of the time when you're sleep deprived, which is fairly significant. And what's happening during those times, actually your brain has gone into what's called a microsleep. So you are so deprived of sleep that your brain prioritizes sleep over whatever it happens to be that you're doing in that moment. And so all of us probably have experienced this at some point where you're in an afternoon meeting and you just do that little head bob. And that's a slightly more significant microsleep. They can be just sort of tiny nanoseconds that happen. But if you think, if, for example, you're driving a car or you're in the middle of an operation and you have that microsleep at a vital minute, everything switches off at that point where you're having a microsleep. And in the same way that your head bobs, kind of your whole system, and you can miss something so vital, and errors are made. And for example, we know that 25% of road traffic accidents can be linked to insufficient sleep. 35% of those that are fatal are linked to insufficient sleep. So you're more likely to have a bigger accident because of it. And we know that big errors in kind of, like, for example, Chernobyl and the space rocket Challenger explosion and the Mile oil spill, all of those big catastrophes have been linked to insufficient sleep or making decisions without enough sleep. And so it's not just a moment of kind of bobbing your head and losing a moment. Actually, these things have real world consequences, which, when you're doing something as vital as operating on someone, are life-changing.
Yeah. Can I just ask you to define what is sufficient sleep?
The recommended guidance is 7 to 9 hours, but actually it's really personal. Every person has a sleep need. It's defined by their genetics, and yours may be completely different to mine, and it's not possible to train yourself to need less sleep. So you may think, oh, I can be like Margaret Thatcher and train myself to sleep 6 hours or less. Actually, the studies say there's a certain amount of sleep that you need that's defined by your genetics, probably by kind of, if you look at your parents, how much sleep you need. And if you get less than that, you will not perform at your best. There's a few people who can survive on less than 6 hours. There's one family in Italy that have been studied that can still perform at their best under 6 hours, but for the majority of us, between 7 and 9, and probably most of us are getting insufficient sleep. And you can probably tell whether you're getting enough sleep. There's a few sort of simple measures. Do you wake up in the morning without needing an alarm? Are you able to get through the day without needing a coffee to stay awake? Are you able to sit through an afternoon meeting without kind of having these head bobbing moments? And when you lie down in bed, does it take 15 minutes or more to fall asleep? If you fall asleep in less than 15 minutes, you probably are sleep deprived, and that's your body kind of so needing sleep that you just crash out.
So my aura alarm, you fell asleep too fast, suddenly makes sense. The 3-minute drop off.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fascinating. So how do you optimize? I guess, I don't know if it's helpful to consider quality and quantity of sleep separately or whether it's the same.
I think it's important. I think there's the sleep quantity, definitely important. You need to prioritize your sleep. Give yourself enough of what's called sleep opportunity to be able to get the sleep that you need. And there's a large portion of people who are not giving themselves enough opportunity, whether that's they have a busy life, busy career, and just can't get that sleep, or whether what sometimes happens is when you're very sleep deprived, you get cortisol released, you're kind of in that stress mode, and you actually don't feel the tiredness that's actually within you. You're kind of in that fight or flight, keep on going, running on cortisol. And when you get to bed at night, you're so wired, it's actually difficult to feel that innate tiredness. And so you end up in almost this cycle where you're not getting the sleep that you need because you're not able to switch off your mind enough to feel that tiredness. So there's those people, and then there's other people who can't sleep because actually they lie down in bed and they're struggling to get to sleep, and that's a little bit different. But then quality is really important. One of the ways that I like to think about it is if you think about sleep being almost an orchestra playing a piece of music overnight, and if you keep on stopping and starting with the orchestra not playing, is not nearly as satisfying to listen to as if they play the whole thing from start to finish. And the more of these kind of breaks that you have in your sleep, the less satisfying it gets. And that's partly because of the way our sleep works. So we have what's called sleep cycles. Each of these sleep cycles last approximately 90 minutes, varies a little bit from person to person, but you go into lighter sleep, and then you go into stage 2 sleep, then you go into your deep sleep, and then you go into your dream sleep. And each of those parts are essential. And in between, you might wake up for a moment, you might become aware, you might have a wee break, you might open the window, whatever it is, and then go back into a sleep cycle. Sometimes we don't remember those transitions from sleep cycles, particularly when we're younger, we go through them. But if you're waking repeatedly, what can happen is those sleep cycles get interrupted. And for example, with obstructive sleep apnea, when you're getting pauses in your breathing, actually you're being woken up in those middle of those sleep cycles. And then you have to start from the beginning again, and you might not be getting into that deep sleep and the dream sleep that you need, because each time you're starting again with that sleep cycle and not getting the full benefit that each of those sleep cycles brings. And the same if you're someone with insomnia or high stress levels, your body naturally keeps you in those lighter stages of sleep, and you might not feel quite so satisfied in the morning because your sleep's more broken, it's less consolidated, it doesn't have that balance between all those stages that you need to feel good in the morning.
So if you wanted to really give yourself the best shot at high quality and the right length sleep opportunity, what do you need to do?
So there's lots of simple things that you can do. The first one, optimize your sleep environment. So make sure that your bedroom is dark, so dark that if you kind of wave your hand in front of your face, you can't see it. And if you live somewhere where there's lots of light pollution, add in a sleeping eye mask to make it dark. We know that that enhances melatonin production, and that helps us achieve better quality sleep, particularly deep sleep. Make sure that your room is as quiet as possible. So earplugs might be useful. You might want to add in pink, white, or brown noise.
Yeah. Could you differentiate those? Because I've never quite understood the difference.
So it's different frequencies of sound waves that you then create, and it tends to be that pink noise is very good for adults, and they tend to use white noise for babies. But some people seem to have preference, and you can either buy machines that create those noises, or you can listen to them on YouTube, or you can, there's apps as well. And sometimes just having that in the background, what it does is when you're asleep, you get sort of what's called sleep spindles that kind of get created to try and block out outside noise. For example, if there was a bin banging, you get a sleep spindle that kind of almost muffles those exterior things, so you can stay in the deeper stages of sleep and stay within sleep. But if you're getting lots of stuff that it's trying to bounce you out to sleep, if you have white noise in the background, it blocks those noises even further. So if you have a snoring partner or a dog that barks, or you live in a noisy neighborhood, having some noise, background noise, can then mask that and help you to sleep a little bit better. And then keeping the bedroom as free as possible of other things. So one of the reasons during COVID people's sleep quality decreased was they were exercising and working in the bedroom. So try and keep the bedroom just for sleep rather than other things. And then, so you've optimized your environment. Try and keep, I know lots of people have animals that sleep with them, but sometimes animals can be quite disruptive. Also think about partners. About a third of the wake-ups in the night are actually caused by our partners. And some people, if you've got a partner who's a real snorer or just moves a lot, sometimes actually sleeping in a separate bedroom can really improve your sleep quality. Not for everyone, but it's something to think about. Then Exercise, really, really important for sleep. And I know if you've got kind of busy jobs, it's really difficult to do, but exercise can really help improve sleep quality, particularly that deep sleep. Thinking about
That.
So deep sleep is used to repair our muscles and help release growth hormone and all those bits. And actually, when we do exercise, we get the kind of micro tears that then need to be repaired, and so it helps induce our deep sleep, but also it reduces our stress and anxiety. And when you're going into sleep with a kind of more relaxed body and mind, actually it's much more easy to fall asleep. And I guess the way to think about it is when our sympathetic nervous system is triggered, our fight or flight response, we obviously you're preparing for danger. Your kind of heart rate is going up, and you're more aware of everything around you, and you're ready to do whatever. But one of the things that is blocked is sleep, because when you sense danger, it's not a great time to be having a nap or falling asleep. So it's almost this biological mismatch that our nervous system, which was designed to keep us alive in a tiger attack, is now being triggered by a stressful day at work, or a difficult patient, or a complaint, or just modern living, a social media post that we don't know how to respond to. And so our nervous systems are kind of in this sort of hyper aroused state, and it's very difficult to switch that off at night. And exercise helps to kind of deal with that and get us into that more relaxed state. That means that it's a little bit easier to switch off at the end of the day.
Apart from exercise, are there any other ways to switch off that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so bedtime routines are really good. I mean, there's a reason why we do them for children, is because they work. And it's basically, if you're asking our kind of nervous systems to suddenly go from mode A to mode B like that, it just doesn't happen. You need to almost, our nervous systems love routine and predictability and consistency. So consistency of a bedtime is really important. We know that being in sync with our circadian rhythm, so our internal body clock, is really important for maintaining good health, for our happiness, our mental health, and all of our kind of bodily functions. But also it really helps us to fall asleep, because our melatonin will be rising at a certain time, our growth hormone will be secreted. All of those natural processes are timed for a certain time, and we know our circadian rhythm can only shift by sort of at most about an hour per day. So if we're going to bed significantly different times, actually we're working against our natural body clock, and that can be a challenge. So having consistency, having a certain time when you start winding down for the evening, and doing those things we do with children. So starting to dim the lights, putting on your comfy pajamas, maybe having a hot bath or shower. Sort of slightly counterintuitively, we need to drop our body temperature in order to initiate sleep, but being in a hot bath or shower, because it aids peripheral dilatation of our capillaries, it ends up dropping our body temperature and helping facilitate the onset of sleep. And reading a book or doing a relaxing activity can again help prepare our bodies for sleep. And there's also things like breath work, yoga nidra, the mindfulness body scan. All of those things can be really helpful resources to just, if you're struggling to switch off and just feeling a bit wired but tired, can just help switch the nervous system. And if you just do them once, you probably aren't going to get the magic happening. It's about doing them consistently. And what you'll find is, if you practice them at a point where you're feeling relaxed anyway to begin with, and you start to get almost that gooey sensation as your parasympathetic nervous system switches on, and you start to go, oh. And as you start to train your body to respond in that way, it then becomes easier, particularly if you're someone who tends to get stressed before bedtime. making it a regular part of your wind down routine can just help facilitate that switch.
Yeah, amazing. Ideally, how long before bedtime might you kind of engage in that?
I think ideally an hour.
Okay.
I mean, the longer the better, really. I think if you have the luxury of a 3-hour bedtime routine, fantastic. But I think in reality, if we can manage an hour, that's great.
Yeah, cool. And have you got any tips for waking up refreshed?
Yeah, and I think that consistency is really important. Our circadian rhythm gives us this lovely little kick of cortisol in the morning, and our melatonin production sort of starts switching off. And if you have a consistent wake up time, what will happen is your body will naturally start to align the dropping in the melatonin and the increase in cortisol for when you wake up. And if you do that regularly, weekend or weekday, and I appreciate that some people are on kind of different rotas and that's a little bit challenging, but you'll find that you start waking up naturally 5 minutes before your alarm goes off and feeling a little bit more refreshed when you do so. But the other thing is making sure that you've had sufficient sleep opportunity, because if you've only had 6 hours of sleep, there's just no way that you're going to be able to wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go. And the other thing to remember is we've got something called sleep inertia. So the first 20 minutes after you wake up, you're kind of just getting going. And if you feel a bit lethargic and dopey during that time, try not to kind of judge it too much. That's just our bodies getting going. Build it into your day. And after that, your hormones will kind of help kick in. And the other thing that's really good is sunshine. Even if it's a cloudy English day, getting outside and getting some bright natural sunlight, it's good for your vitamin D, it's good for your endorphins, but also it switches off your melatonin production and can help you feel refreshed for the day to come.
So if you're getting up at 6 to get into hospital in winter, how important is it to get exposed to light in a different way?
So really important, but it's difficult. I totally appreciate that. Personally, I use a light alarm, and I found that a game changer for me, particularly in the winter, where it's kind of got a natural sunrise that you can set for approximately like half an hour before your alarm goes off. I'm being a sleep specialist, I'm really consistent in my wake up time. And so I don't even set an alarm. I am woken by that natural light, and I never sleep beyond that because I'm awake. But what you can do is you do the natural light alarm, and then you set your actual alarm if you need it. And what I found is because there's that light, it's not the natural light. The other thing you can do if you're really someone who struggles to get natural sunlight, you can buy what's called retimer sunglasses, and they give you enough sort of luxes of light that it's not as good as going out in natural sunlight, but it gives you that kind of hit of morning light, which can help your circadian rhythm kick in. And you can wear them while you're having your breakfast, drinking your cup of coffee, doing all your odd jobs for sort of half an hour in the morning. And if you're someone who really suffers during the winter time, they're not hugely expensive, but they can be a real game changer. You can also buy light boxes that sit on your desk and give you that kick of light in the morning and help with that. But if you're someone who is in hospital, in kind of the limited light, try and get outside if you possibly can do during the day. If you have meetings, see if the person can do like a walking meeting. If you don't have to sit in front of computers, say, why don't we take this on the road, or go sit outside with a coffee, or whatever you want to do. Natural sunlight is really beneficial, and I think it's one of the reasons so many of us are struggling is that 90% of our time we're inside.
So indoor light, just to clarify, is less luxy than outdoor light?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
There are starting to become light solutions that are better, but I doubt any hospitals have caught up on it yet.
Yeah. Great. So I have gathered some questions from surgeons about sleep that I would love to pose to you, to reap your amazing experience and wisdom, if that would be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a nice segue into question number one. So I'm on call, it's the middle of the night and I'm actually asleep and I get a bleep or my phone rings and I wake up and feel like I've been dredged out of the bottom of a ditch and my heart rate's going and and I don't know where I am and I have to give clinical advice. And sometimes even the next day may struggle to remember the conversation itself.
Yeah.
How do you manage that call, or how do you manage the sleep inertia that happens optimally?
It's a really difficult question because there's two elements here. There's you as a person who probably wants to get back to sleep versus the person who wants to give the best advice. And the two solutions are very different, because if you're someone who wants to get back to sleep, actually not waking up completely is going to be easier to get back to sleep. If actually you want to really be on it, then actually you probably want to say, hang on a second, give me 5 minutes, I'll give you a call back. And that you then go into a bright room, because that light will help you to wake up, maybe splash some water on your face, walk around a little bit, maybe even a little snack of something to eat to kind of get yourself going. All those things will signal to your body that now's the time to be awake, and then give them the information that they need. Because when you're getting that kind of really confused, fudgy feeling when you wake up, that's because you've been woken up from deep sleep. And it takes 20 minutes to get out of that state and be fully awake. And even more so if it's in that kind of 2-3 in the morning time when we're in our deepest sleep and hardest to wake up. And so it's kind of that really difficult balance. If you are in a shift where, for example, you're getting a little bit of a sleep opportunity, but you know you're going to be woken up, then actually the best thing to do is be in an environment where you don't go into those deep levels of sleep. So have a sleep in a corridor or in a noisy place, or with the TV on, or something in the background where it stops you from going into those deep levels of sleep. And if you know that it's the middle of the night, you know you're just going to be able to have a little bit of a sleep, but it's not going to be a proper sleep, and you want to be refreshed, just do 20 to 30 minutes, because that will give you the brain power to feel refreshed. It will kind of reset the system, but without allowing you to go all the way into the deeper levels of sleep. Does that help?
Brilliant. And then I guess the second part of that question is, okay, you've answered your phone call, you don't have to go in. How do you then get back to sleep again?
Yeah. And so I work with kind of some elite football teams, and this is really important for them as well, because it's about learning how to switch off when you're feeling wired. And it's a matter of kind of training your brain and body to do this. It takes practice, and it's having this really beautiful, solid bedtime routine where you start to anticipate what the next stage is. And it may be that if you get woken up in the middle of the night, you can use your breath work or your mindfulness meditation, or the body scan's a really good one. That was used by Navy SEALs to get to sleep after combat. And it's a progressive muscle relaxation where you go from part to part in your body, thinking about each of the parts consecutively and relaxing them. And that lasts, you can do sort of 10, 20 minutes of it, and it can be a really nice one to help switch you off. Again, takes practice, but having these things so that whether it's after a night shift or after a stressful phone call or after a horrible day where everything goes wrong, you do these same steps. You dim the lights, you have your bath, your shower, you read your book, you do your meditation, you do your mindfulness, you do your yoga nidra, whatever it is, in the same order. And then your body goes, oh.
Yeah.
And then it's much easier to get back to sleep. And the other thing, if you're someone who struggles to sleep and you're there and you're lying in bed and you're finding you're getting more and more frustrated and it's not happening, at the point when you know it's not happening, get out of bed. Do something different. Go read a book. Go reorganize the cupboards and then get back into bed when you feel sleepy. Because one of the things that can happen is that when you are kind of trying to sleep, the stress of trying to get to sleep triggers that stress response, and then it switches off that ability to get to sleep. And then you start to associate your bed with not being able to get to sleep. And that kind of Pavlov's dog association, you get into your bed and you go, oh, I'm awake. And often you talk to people with insomnia, they'll be there, kind of there, falling asleep, nodding off on the sofa, and they can't keep their eyes open. And then they get into their bed, their head hits the pillow, and ping, they're wide awake. And that's a sleep association. That's a negative one with your bed. And if you're finding that every time you get into bed, you're starting to go, oh, I'm not going to get to sleep, I'm going to think, oh, no. Get out of bed, do something else until you get to that point where you can't stay awake any longer. And another one that's really important, and again, it's so difficult for you surgeons, is try not to have any clocks in the bedroom. Because I know what happens is you get your phone call, you answer it, you immediately look at your clock, you go, it's 2 a.m, that means I've got, and you calculate how many more hours of sleep that you get. And then that brain cognitive function of doing calculations actually wakes you up even more. And then there's this pressure to sleep. And as soon as you've got that pressure to sleep, I've got to sleep, I've only got 4 more hours, it then makes it almost impossible.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, so I really want to create a nighttime routine, but I normally am very reliant on screens. What can I do that's screen-free?
And I think the first question is, do you think the screen impacts your sleep? Because there's been lots in the press about blue light from screens. The more recent evidence says, actually, it probably doesn't affect your sleep in the real world. And even if it does, it's probably not a huge amount. For some people, we find watching something on our screens relaxing. And if that for you is your thing that helps you get to sleep, I have no problem with screens before bed. And so the first thing is kind of, is it a problem? And if it isn't a problem, then don't worry about it. We do know that reading compared to screens improves your sleep quality. And so there is sort of a benefit. If you had a choice, screens or books, I would go for books. But I wouldn't get too stressed by the blue light from your screens. I would think about what you're engaging with. For example, if you're doing social media and posts about with comments or whatever it is frazzles you and gets you worked up, or you're looking at your work email or your rota and that triggers you, don't do that. Make sure you're thoughtful about the content. And also some people, like we have alarms to get up in the morning. Some people set alarms to go to bed as well, because often what happens is you're watching something brilliant on Netflix and you, oh, just one more, and you can get into that cycle. And so having that set, we're not doing any more, it's time for bed, can be helpful as well.
Yeah. And what a good, well, you've already mentioned lots of them actually, hot baths or showers, yoga nidra, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, reading a book. I mean, that sounds like a good old collection. Are there any others you'd add that people tend to enjoy?
I would say the other one is kind of cognitive distraction. It's kind of one of the ones that we use when treating insomnia, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it's a little bit like counting sheep, but counting sheep is a little bit too easy, but basically doing something else with your brain to distract it. And that may be visualizations, like some people visualize animals at the zoo and transforming one animal to another and imagining each part in fine detail. Or, for example, imagining you're cooking pancakes and you can see each step in your mind's eye that you're doing, and basically distracting your mind in different ways so you don't think about sleep. For good sleepers, they just fall asleep and they don't think about it. But when sleep becomes difficult, you can almost start ruminating and having negative thought cycles, and you end up in this kind of washing machine of thought that actually prevents sleep. And that if you can distract the mind from trying to get to sleep or thinking about too many things, actually sleep just happens.
Yeah. Okay, great. What about the chronic snooze issue?
Yeah, and in this actually there was a study done looking at is the snooze button bad, and it's kind of as with everything, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So as I said, circadian rhythm's really important. Like it's, I would say, as important as the amount of sleep that you get. Being in sync with your circadian rhythm is so important, which is why at weekends it's best to wake up at the same time and have a consistent time. Because if you start lying in at the weekend, your circadian rhythm can shift by as much as kind of 2 hours over the weekend. And then you get back to Monday morning and you're trying to be on your normal schedule, but all your wake up hormones are being released at the wrong time, and you're not having the benefit of that. And because all of those things are coordinated throughout the night, you're not working in sync. So you may find that actually, if you're really consistent, you don't need your snooze because you're naturally awake. But one of the common reasons for hitting the snooze button is feeling sleep deprived and not getting enough sleep. And if you're someone who is regularly hitting the snooze button, try and think about, actually, am I giving myself enough sleep opportunity? One of the definitions of insomnia is that you have to be giving yourself enough time to sleep. And if actually, because of your night shifts or whatever it is, you're not actually getting enough sleep, then actually you don't have insomnia, you just don't have enough sleep opportunity. So think about that. And then if you're someone who perhaps hits the snooze button 4 or 5 times, you have to then think, actually, would 20 minutes of extra sleep that's solid be of more benefit than these recurrent snoozes? Or so then set your alarm half an hour later, and just have half an hour extra sleep and plan for it. And the kind of counter position of that is actually some people use the snooze time to kind of wake themselves up from those kind of deeper kind of sleep inertia feelings. And so if you're feeling fine after your few snoozes, then maybe don't worry about it and just build it into your schedule. But for me, hitting the snooze button consistently for me is a kind of red flag. Are you getting enough sleep?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. This one, so common. I'm trying to optimize my sleep. I know I shouldn't eat too close to bedtime or exercise, like do a rigorous exercise class too close to bedtime, but through no fault of my own, my clinic overruns till 7, then I have a 2-hour commute. It's the only time I can do it.
Yeah, and actually, this is one where, again, recent studies have supported that exercise before bedtime is fine. And so there used to be lots of anxiety about too much exercise before bed because it increases your body temperature, which then makes it more difficult to fall asleep. And but as long as you kind of cool down afterwards, have a hot bath or shower, and there doesn't seem to be a significant impact. So exercise before bed, go for it. And that's good for sleep. As far as eating, I would probably just make sure that it's a not too heavy a meal, and that actually, if you're feeling hungry and you go to sleep, actually you don't get as good quality of sleep as well. So making sure that you get a little bit of protein and some slow release carbohydrates to get you through the night. So bowl of cereal or some cheese and apples or something along those lines, crackers, that sort of thing that is not so heavy that you go to bed feeling full, but actually gets you enough sleep, shouldn't impact the quality of sleep, and actually is probably beneficial when compared to going to bed hungry.
So what happens when you're too full?
So when you're too full, then your body's distracted by digestion, feeling bloating, and that can be something that keeps you awake or stops you from going into those deeper stages because you're changing positions or whatever it is.
Okay, great, cool. I feel like I think we've gone through most of them. I really would love to ask you if you could wave a magic wand and gift everyone in the world 3 habits, maybe really simple things, but that could really change their sleep quality, quantity. What would those 3 things be?
I think my 3 would be consistency, would be number 1, exercise, and limiting alcohol.
Tell me about alcohol.
So lots of people use alcohol as a crutch to get to sleep because it's a sedative, but it's detrimental in 2 ways. One, it makes you wake up much more frequently, particularly during the early hours of the morning. And so those sleep cycles will be broken with you bouncing out and waking up recurrently. I'm sure many of us are aware of that with kind of a hangover that you kind of wake up lots of times and you fall back asleep. But even small amounts of alcohol can do that as well. Even if we're not aware of it, it affects the quality of sleep. And the other one, which I think is really important, is it inhibits dream sleep. And dream sleep is so important for our emotional resilience and our emotional processing and for our empathy and all those things that kind of make us human. And dream sleep impairs our ability, alcohol impairs dream sleep. And we're often not aware of that until you stop drinking. And then suddenly, often people who give up alcohol suddenly will say they have the most florid dreams, and that's their body trying desperately to catch up on all that dream sleep that they've missed. And often people say, how much is too much alcohol? And even small amounts of alcohol impacts the quality of sleep. But I mean, if I had to say, the earlier you can drink, the better. Lunchtime drinking better than bedtime drinking, and probably 2 to 3 units over a week probably isn't going to impact your sleep. But I think us sleep medicine people are not particularly fun because a lot of us don't drink and we go to bed at the same time at 10 o'clock each evening.
Your Christmas party must be a riot.
Yeah, exactly.
Your Christmas party must be a riot. Awesome. Great. So I think we're coming to the end of our hour. Is there anything that either we haven't talked about that you feel really important to bring to this, or that is less of a low-hanging fruit but is really impactful for the right person and who that person might be?
I think a couple of bits I would bring up. One, if you're someone who's doing shift work, you are much more prone to insomnia. And on average, it takes people 6 years before they seek help for insomnia. Insomnia is really treatable. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, 70 to 80% their sleep resolves or gets better, which when you compare it to most drugs, that's just brilliant. And it takes 6 weeks on average, and it is life-changing. And so I think the more we can get that message out to people that if you have insomnia, it's not something you should just live with. It has long-term health consequences if untreated on physical and mental health, and get help. And I think the other one I would bring up is for people who are shifting their circadian rhythm and doing night shifts. It's worth sort of just thinking about how you can use light, eating, and exercise to help optimize your circadian rhythm and shift it, because those things can be really helpful in making you feel more alert and able to function. And that most people doing shift work will be sleep deprived. and to give yourself sleep opportunity, to prioritize sleep and recognize it as something which has profound impact, not only our physical health and our mental health, but actually our happiness and our well-being. And it's not until you kind of figure out what good sleep feels like and how you can feel that you then go, oh wow, this really, really matters. And so many of us are just running on empty, on insufficient sleep, and are almost not even aware of what well and happy feels like anymore.
And is there, and this actually, another question that was asked to me recently was, yes, we all know you should sleep, but there just aren't enough hours in the day. When you're in that experience, is there any, like, what can you do to break the trend? What's the most impactful way to reset?
It's really difficult because it's about thinking about your priorities in life, and trying to think. And an example is often when we're really tired, you find yourself sort of scrolling through rubbish on your phone. And there's that thing that often people get, I'm so tired, I just can't be bothered to go to bed. And that when you're maybe scrolling through social media, think about actually what are you trying to get here? Is it that you're trying to relax? And if this is the trying to relax, is this actually doing it? And if not, what are things that you can do that actually will achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve? Because our phones are really addictive, and sometimes that's quite an easy thing to cut out. Because like that dopamine hit that we all spend far too much time looking at our phones, and if we can just reduce that and use that in a more productive way. And also I think when you start having a bedtime routine and starting to wind down, the more you do that, the more you start to feel your kind of innate tiredness, and then it becomes easier to fall asleep, because if you don't feel tired, it's really difficult to motivate yourself to get into bed.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Did that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I was just thinking about hopping into clean sheets. It's just the most heavenly thing in the world, isn't it? When you're tired.
Yeah. And I think so many of us are the kind of go, go, go type of personalities, particularly those who are in medicine. We're high achievers, who like to get stuff done. And sometimes self-care and rest and relaxation fall down to the bottom of our priority list. And actually gifting ourselves a little bit of time, writing it into our diaries can be really powerful. So I'm going to have whatever time it is blocked out for me to rest, and valuing rest can be really important, and acknowledging that it's not kind of wasted time.
No, and ironically, it supports the thing that we're trying to not do it because we're trying to do. So you do, if you're trying to get things done, you do things better when you're rested and well slept.
Yeah, I mean, there was a study done looking at students where they were given a lecture on some biological topic, and then they were split into 3 groups, and one of them crammed for an extra hour. Another group went and had a cup of tea and relaxed, and another group went and had a sleep. And then they had a test afterwards. And the ones who crammed or had a nap did equally as well. But when they were retested on the same material 2 weeks later, the ones who had the nap did best of anyone. And for me, that's a reminder that sleep is not wasted time. Rest is not wasted time. Actually, while we're sleeping, we're consolidating our memories. We're processing all those things that happened to us. And there's no doubt the research supports that being well slept makes you more efficient, more productive, better able to do your job, and kind of kinder to those people around you as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of self-care is a gift to yourself, but actually to those around you as well.
Absolutely. Awesome. So if anyone listening wants to find out more about you or what you do, where can they find you?
So I'm at the Sleep Project. So we have a website, www.thesleepproject.life. And anyone reach out to me, get in touch. We've got a diagnose your sleep quiz that's on there. So if you're not sure what's wrong with your sleep, it can tell you where you're going wrong. And for those who are doing shift work, there's some blogs on there about how to optimize your sleep during shift work if you're struggling. But please do get in touch. And I'm also on Instagram at the Sleep Project, _sleep_project. So would love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Perfect.